Vitamins. For the past few weeks now, Democrats and the Biden administration have been trying to pass significant tax reform. Now, some of these proposals would introduce some pretty significant changes. So without making things too complex, here's everything that you need to understand boiled down. So almost from the time that the Biden administration took power this last year, the administration has been pushing really hard to pass what they call the infrastructure plan. Now, their infrastructure bill is a $2.2 trillion bill that they say is geared around revamping transportation systems, including revitalizing roads and bridges, water systems, manufacturing, and a bunch of different things. Now, of course, you can't just get bills passed through Congress without a couple headaches first. So what we've seen Republicans and Democrats kind of clashing over this $2.2 trillion bill and the way that money is being spent in it. One of the primary points or arguments of Republicans is, hey, this bill costs $2.2 trillion, but roughly between 5 and 10% of the actual money goes to roads. That's not very much. What are you guys doing with the money? Now, whether you believe in revitalizing different systems from roads, purely just the roads, how much money you think we need, that's not the point of this video. We're not trying to get into the nitty-gritty of that bill. My point here is to set up the fact that we've got Republicans and Democrats clashing over this bill in Congress right now, trying to potentially get something passed and get it through. Now, where things gets really interesting for taxes is in the actual negotiation side of things. So as some of you might remember, back when Joe Biden ran in 2020, one of the primary pieces of his platform was to increase corporate taxes from the 21% that Trump lowered it to in 2017 and raise it from that 21% to 28%. Now, it's probably important for reference here to actually look at what the US has had as a corporate tax rate over time. Back before World War II, it fluctuated, but we typically kept it around 10%. Following World War II, especially through that Vietnam era, you saw corporate taxes raised to around 50-60%. And as of late history, following Vietnam and following the Cold War, we've really seen corporate taxes fall to about 35 to 40%, somewhere in that ballpark. And it was that way up until Trump. Trump was actually the first US president in a long time to decrease corporate taxes. Now, whether it's a good idea to actually increase or decrease corporate taxes, we'll get into that a little bit later, but let's focus on the bill here. Now, back on the topic of the actual bill, Republicans have wanted to keep that corporate tax rate at that 21% that Donald Trump dropped it to in 2017. It's actually been one of the bigger points of contention between Republicans and Democrats. Do we keep that at 21% or do we go the Democrat route and raise that to 28%? And so when we're talking about that infrastructure bill here that Joe Biden wants to get passed through Congress, he doesn't exactly have as many votes as he wants to for that $2.2 trillion bill. So this week, in order to hopefully get a little bit of Republican support, Joe Biden actually introduced one of the most interesting bargaining chips that I've seen in a while. Instead of raising the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%, Joe Biden is proposing that, hey, if we can get some Republican support for this infrastructure bill over here, instead of raising that entire corporate tax rate, maybe we'll do a 15% minimum corporate tax rate. Now, this is where things can get a little bit convoluted, a little bit tough to understand, but I'll try and break it down pretty simple for you guys. A corporate tax basically looks at a corporation and says, whatever profit you make, we're going to take a percentage of that. So right now, if you're a corporation and you make $100,000, you have to pay $21,000 in corporate taxes. That's that 21% on profit. Now, where things get a little bit tricky is that some corporations have certain deductions and write-offs that they can use to basically get their tax bill even lower than that 21% that we have it at right now. Now, probably the best example that I could give you of this would be Amazon. Amazon hasn't actually paid that 21% corporate tax rate in a long time. As one of these super companies with a ton of different lawyers, they're able to get all these deductions, write-offs, and all these benefits to where a lot of times they don't end up paying taxes at all. And to fix this problem, this is the 15% minimum corporate tax rate that Joe Biden is talking about. A 15% minimum corporate tax rate would basically say, if you have a bunch of deductions, that's cool, you can take that off the 21% that you have to pay, but it can't go below that 15%. That would mean that a lot of these big companies right now that benefit from having an army of lawyers, a bunch of write-offs, and a bunch of technical deductions that they can use in their taxes, instead of being able to get away with 0%, 5%, 10%, whatever it is that they may be paying, they would have to pay at least 15%. Now, something that's worth asking is, when Joe Biden wanted to actually increase the regular corporate taxes from 21 to 28%, that was supposed to help pay for this infrastructure package that the Democrats are also trying to push. Now, the question that's worth asking is, if we're not raising the corporate taxes, we're only raising the corporate minimum, will that actually make enough money to basically help pay for this infrastructure package? Now, the Biden administration has actually responded to this question, and what they basically said is, well, we're going to put more money into the IRS, and we're going to tighten the auditing on those top companies in the United States that make a lot of money. I guess their idea is that there's going to be large havens of wealth that haven't paid taxes, and the IRS and the Biden administration are going to find those lump sums of cash. Now, whether that's going to work or not, that's up for debate. That's beyond the scope of this video. The question that I actually want to answer instead is this corporate minimum going to drastically change anything? How is business going to change if the Biden administration gets its way and they negotiate this 15% corporate minimum? So right off the bat, when this news was announced about 2 weeks ago, there was a bunch of companies whose stock prices fell. And the list is actually pretty interesting. On CNBC, it's being reported that Amazon, Netflix, Qualcomm, Micron, Nvidia, Adobe, Pfizer, McDonald's, and FedEx are among some companies who saw their price in shares drastically fall after this news broke. Now, a list like that really makes you stop and wonder how many big companies in the United States are benefiting from paying lower corporate taxes than maybe we expected that they would. So in the interest of highly intellectual, fair, and balanced reporting, here's a pros and a cons list of what a 15% corporate minimum would do. So the first big pro is that large businesses wouldn't have a tax advantage over small corporations. Now, to be clear, if you're a small mom and pop shop and you're competing against the Walmarts of the world, you're not just competing against somebody with an economy of scale, with bigger resources than you. You're also competing with someone who's getting tax advantages to where they're making greater profit margins while also undercutting you. One of the big pros of potentially passing this 15% minimum would be that these smaller companies are on a more even playing field with some of these big corporations. Now, on the con side of things, the cost of consumer goods is going to skyrocket. Let's just keep it a buck. When have you ever known a corporation to get gouged for some new tax bill or some new bill at all and not pass it on to the consumers? That's just economics 101. That's how that works. I would really urge people to start expecting, if Amazon is going to pay a 15% corporate minimum up from roughly zero, expect that 10 to 15% increase in the cost of goods that you would buy on Amazon. Now, we picked on Amazon a lot here, but it's not just Amazon. A lot of tech companies, especially a lot of these multi-billion-dollar companies, have the armies of lawyers that allow them to basically get away with paying less in taxes. That's going to mean a lot of things like computer chips, phone parts, shipping costs. A lot of different stuff is going to go up if this 15% corporate minimum gets passed, and it's going to get passed on to us. Now, the second one is going to be either a pro or a con, depending on your beliefs on government and business. And that's fewer dollars in the hands of business, more dollars in the hands of government. Now, again, this is a little bit of a left-right issue. Do you trust the government to spend the money better, or do you trust business to spend the money better? Because ultimately what this bill is going to do if it does get passed is take more money out of the hands of business, put it in the hands of government. Now, I try to stay pretty objective, but honestly speaking, I do trust business to make money go further than I trust government. In government, you get a lot of lost money, waste, corruption. I don't trust those. And lastly, another con to consider is that we're going to see the death of a lot of businesses. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, and it probably won't even happen in a 2 to 5 year time span. But what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of companies get really constricted that have become so accustomed to having these big tax advantages, that extra 10 to 15, 20% of income that they're not paying in taxes. You're going to see those guys get constricted and slowly die down the road. And that's because ultimately they made their business model contingent upon the idea of getting these huge tax advantages by not paying taxes at all. And even though I'm a pretty big capitalist, I have to say to the businesses, that's on you, dog. Y'all were the dumb that thought, oh, we'll just never pay taxes and we'll get away with it. At some point, there's always the chance that that catches up with you, and it's looking like it potentially could if this rule gets passed. So to kind of boil down everything that we just discussed and talked about there, I applaud Democrats for trying to come up with a solution to get Republicans on board with their infrastructure bill. They're trying to meet Republicans somewhere in the middle, even if it's definitely a little bit more left than the Republicans would like. But with that said, just because you're increasing that corporate minimum on companies that don't pay taxes doesn't mean that there's not going to be significant damage to the US economy if you do this. There's a lot of manufacturing, there's a lot of different companies out there that are unfortunately dependent upon the idea of not paying any taxes or paying extremely low taxes because of their army of lawyers and all their write-offs. So there is some good that would come from this, but I would argue that there's a little bit more negative or a little bit more bad that's going to come from this. And one thing that I haven't even mentioned yet is that we're just looking at federal corporate taxes. Most states actually have corporate taxes on their corporations as well. That means that some of these corporations that really aren't paying any federal corporate taxes right now might also be doing the same with states. They might have finessed states into basically being there for free. Whether that's right or that's wrong, that's also something to consider when you talk about Joe Biden and the Democrats' plan to increase corporate taxes from that 21% to 28%. And in case I haven't made it clear so far, oftentimes who gets hurt by these corporate taxes is the small guys, the small businesses without the army of lawyers, as opposed to those big companies where they've got the suits around them. They've got a circle of suits just ready to take it to court and fight every tax that they can. So with that said, the minimum corporate tax is really kind of a mixed bag. There's good and there's bad that could come from it. Now, since I kind of crapped on the left's idea of raising corporate taxes, let me also take a minute to crap on the right for what they did. One of the primary points of argument for Republicans with this infrastructure bill has been, hey, only 5 to 10% of this money actually goes to bridges and roads. Where's the rest of the money going in this $2.2 trillion bill? My message to Republicans would be, y'all lost the right to talk about money. Y'all lost the right to talk about being conservative with money when Papa Trump printed $9 trillion in 12 months, dog. And that's crazy because I really do consider myself as somebody who's more fiscally conservative, but holy crap, Republicans are the pot calling the kettle black, man. You can't print $9 trillion in a year and then be on Democrats about, that's $2.2 trillion, that's a lot of money. Bro, what did you guys just do? Y'all really lost the ability to talk about that, man. And you did it to yourselves. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully that wasn't too complex and too convoluted. I try to break down these big things that can happen in our world, especially finance related, in a way that's easy to understand. If I didn't explain anything and maybe you guys got a couple questions on it, a couple loose ends, be sure to hit me in the comments below. Just go ahead and ask me. But my name is Mitchell and I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. God bless, man.
Bitch, I'm flawless, why I'm too official. What you know about getting a check and spending with your niggas? All my niggas keep a gun, no way ain't never slipping. What you know about walking in your show strap with a pistol?